Well, very, very happy to be here. And Kathy, you did not mention my service to the Trump administration. Thank you very much. I didn't want to start off with any political statements, but. So I was asked today if I could summarize for this fine marketing crowd the last 10 years of 3,000 pages of federal regulations in healthcare IT, where the next 5 years will go, all the doctors' satisfaction with all the products and services they're getting from the IT industry, not so much. But to give you some guidance as to what I think the next couple of years will bring based on what the couple of years in the past have brought. So let's start off with a very brief history of time. Back in the Bush administration, there was a very fine guy named David Brailer. And David was given a budget of $0 and asked to revolutionize healthcare IT in America. And he actually came up with 4 powerful ideas, even though his budget was $0, which is, one, we should probably turn the industry from a paper-based industry to an electronic industry, because if you don't have data, kind of hard to do big data with paper. We probably want to engage patients and families, because we didn't do such a great job in 2004 of communication and coordination. Probably actually want to measure quality and do population health. And then we probably want to share data across the ecosystem. And those 4 ideas have actually percolated through now 5 national coordinators across 2 presidential administrations. It's still the same goal we're pursuing. But don't worry, I mean, when they say healthcare IT will be in the future, it isn't always in the future. We are making some progress. I will today tell you a little bit about what we've done, but also the progress that remains. Sharing data has still been a struggle in healthcare, and I won't bore you with the bits and the bytes of standards and all the efforts that we put into cybersecurity, but let's just say this. So Kathy, you have a fever.
Yes, I do.
What's a fever? I, as a doctor, will tell you it's a temperature of 101.5 for greater than a 24-hour period. You might say, oh, I have chills. I feel sweaty. The Irish wedding has made me a little heated. I don't know. So the problem is in banking or many other industries, it's very straightforward to share data because we know what a dollar is or we know what a date is. But in healthcare, a fever, all these amorphous concepts. So we've spent 10 years, unless you think that's a long time. I mean, again, we have made progress, just hard problems to begin to share data across our ecosystem of providers and patients and payers. A lot of government organizations and private organizations doing that. We have begun to share more information with patients and gather information from patients. And I'll tell you a few stories about that. At Beth Israel Deaconess, we've been sharing notes with patients for several years. In fact, we've shared every byte of data, your problem list, medication list, and your lab test since 1999. One of the things people worried about when we started doing that is that people would find mistakes. They'd litigate. It would create, a fracture in the doctor-patient relationship. And exactly the opposite happened. People found mistakes and corrected them before bad things happened. There was actually less litigation, in fact, tighter bonds between doctors and patients. So this idea is, folks in the audience have talked to me about patient-family engagement and really making sure there's a shared care plan, and this is a team effort, absolutely the right thing to do. And all the myth that you hear about doctors and patients not interacting well is just that, it's a myth. You hear this term, and you guys are marketing people, big data. What is big data? I have no idea. I have 4 petabytes of data. Is that a lot of data? It could be. Don't seem to have a whole lot of problem backing it up or using it. So to me, the important thing is not the size of the data, but it's turning the data into wisdom. We'll tell you a little bit more about that. But giving a doctor 10,000 normal blood pressure measurements from your Withings blood pressure cuff, not so helpful. Telling the doctor that your blood pressure has had a sudden increase after being normal, it's now too high, that's interesting. And so I think our big challenge in healthcare is data visualization, the sort of things you guys do. How do you send a message to a clinician or care team member about action that needs to be taken and not just overwhelm them with raw data? Lots of work to do. Of course, you hear the word cloud everywhere. The cloud will solve all of our problems. Well, it does turn out that in healthcare, we are starting to see the cloud make a real impact. I have 450 locations of care I support today. Do you think I can actually take a desktop running software to 450 locations? Doesn't work. Doctors and nurses are mobile people. They want the phone. They want the iPad as the client they use to do all their work, and they want the services to be cloud-based, available anywhere at any time, traveling in China or traveling in Chestnut Hill. Shouldn't matter. And so we are starting to see companies like Amazon and Google sign business associate agreements to keep healthcare data private and host healthcare applications. Who would have thought that Gmail might be the way that you would email your doctor securely? But that's the sort of thing we're starting to see, the evolution of mainstream companies creating healthcare secure environments. But how have we done on this journey through 2 presidential administrations? Looking around the room, some of you may be doctors, but I know all of you are patients. So, Kathy, last time you went to a primary care giver, how much time did they spend staring at the keyboard versus staring at you? Yeah, it's not so great. So we've told doctors, you have 12 minutes to see the patient, enter 141 structured data elements, be empathetic, never commit malpractice. It's not possible, right? So we have to take a step back and ask, how might the team, the doctor, the nurse, the pharmacist, the social worker, the patient, the family, all contribute to the data? I mean, think about it. If we used Facebook as opposed to Epic, it might actually be easier, right? So there are things we need to work on because docs aren't so happy nor efficient. I did actually ask the question of a number of folks in Boston, would it be easier to coordinate a team-based activity like healthcare with Facebook or Epic? And they said Facebook would be far easier. Sharing data is something we have to work on, where the data is available when you need it for what you need it for. I think patients and families very much want to be respected, set up their care plans, interact with their care teams. Our patient-family engagement to date has not been totally useful. If I say, Kathy, your serum sodium is 140 right now, woohoo! It's like, what are you going to do with that? As opposed to, here's your care plan, here are your care preferences. I'm going to ensure you get the care you want when you want it, and that I'm going to share everything about you with you. Nothing will be done to you without you. I mean, that's the kind of patient-family engagement we want to work toward. I already mentioned that we've made some progress on turning data into wisdom. But I will be honest with you, if you go to healthcare IT conferences, many of the big data products are compiled in PowerPoint, which is a wonderful development language, so easy to change. I mean, there's just not a huge amount of real product in the industry right now. And I mentioned the cloud is happening. I put a few grades on here just for your amusement. If you were to actually ask the customers, the doctors and the patients, how well we've done healthcare IT after $35 billion have been spent by 2 administrations, they would say not great, right? I'm not really interacting with my doctor the way I want to. The doctors are miserable. They go home at 6 every night, and then they spend 3 hours after dinner on documentation. We can do better. We certainly, if you look at this, get about a B- after $35 billion. But what should it look like? So let me tell you a true story. And my wife and I have both signed consent arrangements with our compliance office. We are sharing all our healthcare, all of our genomes, every experience we have purely for the benefit of those who come after us. So don't worry, no privacy issues here. My wife, about a month ago, said, I've had an unexpected 20-pound weight loss. My heart rate is at 110. My eyebrow hair is thinning, and I'm always feeling tired. Now, for the non-doctors in the room, I've just described the symptoms of hyperthyroidism. And hyperthyroidism, kind of uncomfortable because it's like your body's on speed the whole time. So I told her, you probably need a lab test to test your thyroid. So what she does is she picks up her phone, and because Beth Israel Deaconess has secure doctor-patient messaging, she messages her PCP, have these symptoms, think it could be a thyroid problem, need a lab test. Well, because all of our web-based and mobile software at Beth Israel Deaconess runs on phones and iPads and these sorts of things, the doctor then ordered a lab test using her phone at a nearby Quest 2 miles from our home. My wife drove down, got her blood test. Quest has an app that allows you to see the results within 2 hours. Saw that, keep in mind, it's like 4 hours after we've had the discussion, that she in fact has hyperthyroidism, and her TSH, thyroid stimulating hormone, had a value of 0. Basically, her thyroid was spewing out so much hormone, her brain had shut off all controls. So then she needed a referral to a specialist, texts her PCP, the PCP texts the specialist. We arranged an appointment the next day at a suburban location not far from our home, because who wants to drive for 2 hours down the Mass Pike for the joy of paying $40 for parking? That's, alas, no one. So she's able to see the specialist the next day. One more lab test is done. She sees the result. Turns out she has Graves' disease, treatable with a medication. The specialist prescribes methimazole to the Walgreens next to our house. So keep in mind, it's like 24 hours, start to finish. Every transaction done with this, my wife picks up the medication and is totally fine today, right? I mean, that's the kind of interaction that doctors and patients and families want, not spending hours on a Pike drive. And along the way, the entire care plan, care preferences was all broadly communicated among all these team members I've referenced. There's still work to do, and my mother lives in California, and fine hospital in Southern California. She broke her hip, went in. The emergency physician said, I need to keep a reconciled list of your medications, and her primary care doctor's office was closed, so she was told, bring in every plastic pill bottle that has ever been prescribed since 1982. And by the time I flew to LA, she was in the hospital on 22 different medications, sitting in a corner, mumbling, completely unaware of person, place, or situation. And this, unfortunately, is the reality of most of America. We aren't even able to share your medication list from your primary care doctor's office 2 miles away, so mistakes happen. And that's something we really need to, over the next couple of years, eliminate. In many ways, we can do it. Doctor to doctor, secure communication, sure. But how about doctor to patient? If I, at every encounter with you, send all the information about you to your phone, and your phone is now your comprehensive medical record, and you could share it from your phone as you will, certainly problems like that would be solved. And is anybody here from Apple? Because it may or may not be the case that Tim Cook today at the Bill Graham Theater will talk about how Apple will make that possible. But who could ever predict what Tim will say? I don't know. And my non-disclosure agreement would be violated anyway. I recently was diagnosed with hypertension. And here was the question. My blood pressure boring 110/50 suddenly went to 170/100. My primary care doctor said it could be one of 3 things. The Mass Pike commute, which is awful, too much green tea, or your boss is really evil. But no one was sure which of those 3 things were true. And the problem, of course, with primary care today is you show up at your office once every 6 months for a blood pressure measurement, not going to really help you understand whether it's the commute or tea or your boss. So I, from Amazon.com, got a Withings blood pressure cuff, which connects to my phone and uploads blood pressure measurements and shares them as I wish with my doctor. Beth Israel Deaconess wrote an app that takes all the data from your phone, shares it to the medical record. I was able to figure out that it wasn't the commute or the tea or my boss. In fact, it was my parents, because my mother and father both have hypertension and their parents had hypertension. But it was only possible because I was an engaged patient with software that enabled me to communicate from devices in my home to my doctor's office to make the diagnosis. And so I was treated rapidly, and I'm totally fine. My wife was diagnosed with stage 3A breast cancer in December of 2011. She was 50 at the time, Korean female. So, of course, the interesting question is the last 10,000 Asian females who were 50 with this tumor, how'd they do? How were they treated? What were the side effects? I was able, because I'm the CIO overseeing all of these care locations, to do big data analytics and answer that question. The last 10,000 Asian females with this tumor were treated with Cytoxan, adriamycin, and Taxol. They were cured. Problem was, Taxol, kind of nasty drug, causes neuropathy. you lose all the sensation in your fingers and toes. And that maybe is okay if you're a jackhammer operator, but my wife is a studio artist who spends all of her day doing finely detailed work with pens and brushes. Numb fingers, not going to work. No one's ever done a clinical trial that asks how much Taxol is the right dose. No one knows. So what we said was, based on the big data analytics, so looking at 10,000 patients like her, we'll give her the full dose of Cytoxan adriamycin, half the dose of Taxol. See how it goes. And she was completely cured and has no numbness. And this, when you hear from Obama about precision medicine, is really the direction we want to go. Let's look at the people before you, look at your particular circumstances, your genome, and then figure out how best to treat you that's in accordance with the evidence and your wishes. As I mentioned, I have been calling up folks at Amazon, Dell, and Google, and figuring out how to move the Beth Israel Deaconess to a cloud computing environment. It's my hope in 5 years, Beth Israel Deaconess won't host data anymore. It's not very interesting. I have to achieve 5 nines reliability, complete security, while doing complete innovation. It's really hard. And so I would much rather have the 50,000 employees of Amazon than the 200 employees of Beth Israel Deaconess IT keeping these things up and running 24/7. And it's looking good. We've started to move our development and test environments. We've been able to do it cost effectively and be able to do it pretty securely. So a couple of next steps that I want to highlight. Our federal regulatory burden over the last couple of years has been so high that much of the private sector has had its entire agenda co-opted by federal regulatory compliance. And so this is not a political statement. I mean, regardless of what administration we get next, it's time to return innovation to the private sector. If the patients and their families and the doctors are looking for solutions that fundamentally change their experience, let those solutions achieve a good outcome, as opposed to federal government bureaucrats dictating in infinite detail how the technology should work. Because I will tell you, when we wrote over the last several years all these regulations, no one envisioned that the iPhone would be able to have something like Health Kit or Care Kit, or these products that are on it today, being able to share data from your home with your doctors. Those are private sector initiatives. There are a number of problems that the private sector can probably solve. Now, probably, I'm just guessing this, that if an Irish American, let's just take purely that as an example, named Maureen Kelly, who lives in South Boston, came to receive care, and we had to pull her data from all the places in Boston where it lived, it wouldn't be so easy. There are a fair number of Maureen Kellys in South Boston. And I actually know the problem personally, because Beth Israel Deaconess and Atrius Healthcare actually had to do this for Maureen. Do you know there are 5 Maureen Kellys born on September 1st, 1951 in the zip code South Boston? And the problem we had was that she, in the course of the last year, had 3 kidneys removed, a brain transplant, and twins, right? Because we merged 5 different humans together. So the private sector needs to figure out, how do I uniquely identify people? And is that like you have TSA PreCheck, a global entry card? Do you sign up for a healthcare identifier that we can use to ensure you're getting safe, quality, coordinated care across the community? That's a problem to solve. Or if I want to send doctors on your care team information about you, how do I reach them electronically? We don't have any kind of directory of all those electronic endpoints to send information to, so we've got to work on that. We have to think about the outcomes we want to achieve rather than the process of achieving them. So if doctors get paid based on the fact that my blood pressure is controlled, that's probably better than telling a doctor, oh, he must counsel or she must counsel me on smoking status every time I go to a visit. I mean, let's focus on what we are trying to achieve. And I'll give you a silly example of that. I have glaucoma, again, something I inherited. And my ophthalmologist is actually graded at the moment, based on these regulations, based on whether or not the person measured my body weight and had smoking cessation counseling with me. Now, I don't smoke and my body weight's okay, but I mean, that's the regulation, as opposed to, how's my sight? Is my intraocular pressure under control? So we hope that we pivot over the next couple of years to focusing on outcomes and making sure the patients are achieving the wellness that they want. So I look to the next couple of years with optimism. Again, you're a marketing crowd, but I think you're going to see some trends. You're going to see new mobile devices, new cloud services. You're going to see patients, families, doctors, nurses, pharmacists working together as teams better, because we are going to see that alignment of economic incentives will start paying the healthcare system for wellness in your home as opposed to sickness in the hospital. Remember, in fee-for-service medicine, which we've been under for decades, I'm paid more based on the tests I ordered and the hospitalizations you have, as opposed to, shouldn't I be paid because you didn't come to the hospital or didn't have a test? And that's this new regulation called MACRA and MIPS, a complex acronym that's coming in 2017 and 2018. So assume more products, more services, more innovation, and alignment of incentives. Last thing to mention, security, of course, will continue to be a battle for us all. Not a day goes by where you're not picking up the paper and finding someone who's been hacked in some regard. And I'm investing millions of dollars in technical security, but I'll tell you, those millions are only as good as the most gullible employee we have. So purely hypothetically, imagine I were to send the following email to, say, 2,000 Harvard professors. HIPAA, H-I-P-P-A, real important. You now password change. And then I gave the URL changemypassword.com. What percentage of Harvard professors would click on it? 31%. So alas, when we look to the next few years, I think what you'll also see is innovative approaches to security. Just reflecting on what Apple has done, by the way, I have no stock in Apple or anything, purely a reflection on these devices. They have decided that this will be the container for your healthcare record, not the iCloud. So when you put data about yourself in this, it is biometrically accessed with your thumbprint, it stays on your phone, and it is manipulated by you on your phone. And if you want to send it somewhere else, you can. And the reason, of course, they did this was the Jennifer Lawrence problem. Right? If Jennifer Lawrence gave her username and password to the iCloud to her assistant, and her assistant gave it to the Nigerian businessman, and the Nigerian businessman spread naked photographs on the internet, you probably don't want to do that with your HIV status, mental health records, or sexually transmitted disease values. You probably don't. So fine, keep it under your control, under your lock and key on the device you carry. And that makes sense. So I think, lest there be naysayers that say this is impossible, the technology is not ready, it's too clunky, too hard to use, and it will never be secure enough, there are always ways that we can move forward. I will tell you, the patients want it, the doctors want it, and regardless of the outcome of the presidential election, I am convinced the next couple of years will bring us innovation, and we will see novel uses of data and products. I leave it to you guys, as the marketing arm, to help dispel the myths and help reduce the volume of the naysayers.